What's going on, everyone? Lightning Thunderbolt here, and welcome to the second piece of content we got today, or at this point, at the time of upload yesterday, regarding Sonic Frontiers. Once again, from the official IGN website. Link, of course, will be in the description as always. The first hands-on impressions of their experience with Sonic Frontiers, whatever that means. So there's going to be some dialogue throughout the video. We're going to be basically just, stopping here and there and analyzing it. So we're basically going to get into it. And the last few days, we basically got a couple of through the last week. We got the world movement experience and like the momentum experience, and we've gotten the combat analysis. And from what we see in combat, looks relatively solid. They just need to polish the animations, but the main concern is the movement, right? So that's why we're going to be able to see what we can get from this, since they really don't show much of anything new, just their impressions. So it'll be interesting to see what they say. But there were some things that were a bit concerning. But we'll just get right into it and see what they have to say, and stop and analyze as we go. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Sonic's done a lot in 30 years. He's been a pioneer of the high-speed 2D platformer, an Olympic athlete, a respectable kart racing.
Okay, so it seems like the one who's talking right now, Mitchell Saltzman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This seems to be the IGN reviewer or the person who's speaking. I don't know, either or both, perhaps. Wait, what is that? Is that okay? This is from the Nintendo collection, I guess.
High-speed 2D platformer,
of course it is.
An Olympic athlete, a respectable kart racing enthusiast, a fighter, a TV star,
Smash.
And a Hollywood blockbuster movie star as well. But he's never done open world. And
false. Are you okay? He's at least done partial. Also, okay, that's definitely reminiscent right there. That right there is reminiscent of the orbital spring from Lost World. So. Right there, it's like they're using Lost World engine, and it's like they're okay. Well, I'll wait to get into that, but he's never done open world.
And Buster movie star as well, but he's never done open world.
That everyone says he's never done open world. Oh, Breath of the Wild clone, Sonic Adventure, people. We had this semi-open. Sonic was doing open world before it was popular. I don't want to hear that. You gotta be kidding me. Everyone's just disregarding it because we just want to forget that the 2000s happened. It's like, no. He's done this before, and he was successful at it. And that's why we're going to get into the main issue of this video that they talk about. It's like they talk a lot about the movement. They show a lot of the movement or exploration gameplay. It's an open world Sonic game. You can make him move however you want. He's not locked into boost formula. So why? Why are we forcing him to be boost Sonic when he could be rolling downhill? I chose to refrain from injecting some of my own opinions and the adventure stuff into this, sort of forming my own opinion, seeing what was positive. But now it's about that time where we have to criticize what we're worried about, what we're concerned about with the game. And it's just the idea that there doesn't seem to be momentum present in an open world Sonic game where that would really, really benefit him, because he has done some semblance of open world before. Arguably better than some of his competitors with the adventure series. And the idea that they have a way to translate Sonic's original physics, and I use that specifically to not say classic, because no, Sega, we don't just want you to throw nostalgia in for the sake of pandering to nostalgia. Using Sonic's original physics from the original trilogy, the classic games, the Genesis games, and translating that into 3D. They did so with Adventure, but we'll get into that momentarily. But the idea that he's never done open world before is completely false. He's never done full open world before. But he has done some semblance of open world, and translating the original physics into 3D has worked. But they haven't been doing that here, and we're going to get more into it. But go on. I'll let you continue.
And Sonic Frontiers fixes to change that. I was fortunate enough to be one of the first people outside of Sonic Team to go hands-on with Sonic Frontiers.
Sorry, when he said I was fortunate enough, it sounded like he said I was fortunate enough. 4chan? Like the leaks? No, I'm sorry. Anyway, continue.
Outside of Sonic Team to go hands-on with Sonic Frontiers, and let me just say, if you're worried about how the blue blur will fare in this unfamiliar genre, well, I think Crush 40 probably put it best. Open your heart, it's gonna be alright.
See, I misheard this when he first did that. Just, you know, listen again.
Fair in this unfamiliar genre, well, I think Crush 40 probably put it best. Open your heart, it's gonna be alright.
Just like at first, when they said Crush 40, my ears perked up. It was like, wait, Crush 40 confirmed? Are we gonna have like rock influence music in this game? But he was just saying like, oh well, if you're worried about how he's gonna fare in a completely open world, oh, Crush 40's lyrics put it best. Open your heart, it's gonna be all right. It's like, you don't do that. Don't just nostalgia pander to adventure fans and said, see, we made the adventure reference there. It's like, look, we like the references in the gameplay. So far, it's all right, but there's not enough that's taking from it and using what worked for that semi-open world to translate into open world, which would work so well. And don't just do it. Don't just name drop Crush 40 and then just reference like some of the other. You don't get to do that yet. All right, I'm sorry, you don't get to do that. Like, if you're gonna name drop that in something called hands-on preview, you can't just do that so freely. Like, we're wondering about the music situation, and this made me think. Let me get this off the screen. Actually, now that we're like getting into music, the music discussion about Sonic, it's like I was worried about hey, are we gonna be able to get more of that rock influence? Are we gonna see or hear some Crush 40 throughout the game at any point? Is there gonna be a Crush 40 main theme? Like, what's gonna be happening? And he just name drops Crush 40, and it's like, oh no, he was just referencing their lyrics just to be like, hey, adventure fans, pay attention. We're acknowledging you, and it's like, acknowledge us with your actions, not your words. Like, I know this is talking like to Sonic Team, not IGN, but just someone told him to drop that line just to be like, adventure fans, pay attention. You haven't really proven with the gameplay yet that this is for adventure fans. I don't know, man. But regarding the music, there was I'm going to put the link in the description to a video by a YouTuber by the name of Sonic Guitars, and what he did was that I think someone mentioned, hey, why does it only have piano? Why doesn't it have adaptive music? Like when you're speeding up, fighting enemies, and grinding on rails and stuff, why doesn't the music increase? And Sonic Guitars actually actively attempted to do this, where he put in like more drums and bass and guitars, and like there was guitar harmonies and stuff, and it there was just the piano and the orchestral stuff, as Sonic was sort of like moving slowly and just exploring. But as he was speeding up, grinding on rails, destroying enemies, like he brought in like this guitar and bass and drum, and it sounded really good. It's like, yes, this is what we would want, and it sounded very Crush 40 influenced. That's what we would want to see and hear out of adaptive music would work really well, and it sounded very much adventure era influenced. So that's what we want to see. That's why I'm hoping there will be Crush 40 influence in this game. I heard one of my friends, Conic, mentioned that. Ian Flynn on Twitter responded again with, another one of those knowing smile things. So maybe that's in reference to the story. Maybe that's in reference to we're going to be getting Crush 40 music influence. I don't know. But come on now, IGN. You can't just drop the name Crush 40 and some lyrics like we do, us Sonic Tubers in a bunch of our videos. I don't like using Sonic Tubers, I'm sorry. Us Sonic YouTubers in a bunch of our videos. You don't just get to do that if you're not actually going to follow through on it. So you better not be doing that. Like, don't be BSing us here. Don't do that unless we're actually going to get to see like some Crush influence in the games. But anyway, that's rant over. Just had to say that. But you don't get to do that yet. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. All right.
Open your heart. It's gonna be all right.
Why did I have to pause around that frame? All right. So now I was going to talk a bit more. Yeah. Okay. Mitchell Saltzman.
The first thing that struck me about Sonic Frontiers was how uniquely somber and serene it was right from the outset.
And he talks about this now.
Flying into a wormhole with Tails and Amy, Sonic finds...
Okay, listen again. Story detail there. That's like our first little breadcrumb of the story detail.
A wormhole with Tails and Amy was right from the outset. After flying into a wormhole with Tails and Amy, Sonic finds himself separated from his friends and all alone on an isolated island.
So that's somewhat interesting. It kind of seems like they're just starting it off with like the generations type thing where he's with all his friends and then he gets pulled into another world. I'm hoping it's not just going to be like, oh, they're doing another birthday party for Sonic and then it's just the rehash of generations. Please just don't do that. Like, show us a little bit more character development between, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, which we're assuming are going to be the main four featured in this game. So he was pulled into a wormhole with Tails and Amy and is isolated on these islands. And so far with the leaks that's checking out, I also talked about this before in the previous analysis video. Does that mean we're going to get to see Tails, Knuckles, and Amy playable, each with their own unique styles? Because that could really save this game. Oh, just noticed another detail here. What's this spring below the level here? Where is this gonna go? I'm guessing since the Emerald Shrine, or the Emerald Shrine looking thing is kind of above this area, that's going to activate something interesting. I mean, if the mysteries of this world are activated and, you know, they unlock more lore and more cutscenes and stuff, that's kind of going to be interesting. So, like, the lore seems like it could be interesting. The combat seems interesting. It's the momentum that's the main problem right now, but we'll get into that a bit later. Continue with what he was saying right now.
Nothing but an AI voice guiding him to collect the Chaos Emeralds. There's no one for Sonic.
AI voice guiding him to collect the Chaos Emeralds. So kind of checks out with like the Ghost Girl, some of the leaks with that. I think we're pretty sure that it's Amy, but I guess he's specifically not saying that because he's wondering, have fans figured it out yet? Oh, are we worried that it's, but I mean, it was confirmed it was Amy. So it's Amy guiding him around, and I guess she's communicating from some other world. I guess that's the cyberspace levels, but he mentioned to collect the Chaos Emerald. So let's go back to that detail.
But an AI voice guiding him to collect the Chaos Emeralds. There's no one for Sonic to bounce quips off of, no energetic Crush 40 soundtrack, just wide open fields.
No energetic. So Crush 40 not confirmed then? Are we going to get later? He just name drops Crush 40 at where? At like, what, 30 seconds in. He name drops Crush 40 and some lyrics. Let you say
Frontiers, and let me just say, if you're worried about how the blue blur will fare in this unfamiliar genre, well, I think Crush 40 probably put it best. Open your heart. It's gonna be alright.
So why name drop Crush 40 and their lyrics and then go to here and just say
him to collect the Chaos Emeralds. There's no one for Sonic to bounce quips off of, no energetic Crush 40 soundtrack, just wide open fields as far as the...
Then why name drop them? Why say Crush 40, oh, open your heart, it's gonna be alright. Oh, and there's no Crush 40 in this game. Why do that? Don't. Just don't do that. It's... It just pisses Sonic fans, especially adventure fans, off more when you're like just alluding to that to be like, hey, we remember Crush 40 exists. And look, I get that this is an IGN reviewer, but I still think that like Sonic Team Sega probably had an influence with like, hey, you know, drop the adventure fan references. If you're gonna do that, give us adventure influence because we ain't seeing it in this game so far. That's like, you know. With the attack style, like I'm seeing some 06, Project 06, Black Knight, I like that. But momentum, I'm not seeing the adventure yet, and we're not hearing the soundtrack. And the soundtrack is something I didn't like talk about in earlier videos. The idea that we're not hearing this rock-influenced music appear at any point, it just, you know, it's bothersome. It's bothersome that this is an open-world Sonic game and, like, there's not even at the action sequences we're hearing it. He's going to go into why, but it's not a very good excuse as to why, so I'll let him talk about it.
I can see. There's an air of mystery in Sonic Frontiers, and it's a vibe that's driven home even further by the beautiful yet minimalist piano melodies that accompany Sonic as he explores the island.
Uh-huh. So going for a less is more thing, I guess. And again, that gives me Sonic Boom vibes because like in their Adventure Fields it was just minimalistic piano stuff. There were no, and I get that with Adventure Fields, that's understandable, but since your game is going to be primarily Adventure Fields and like exploring stuff there, I don't know, when with the space reveals, like they said, the music goes hard there, so maybe we have to wait for that. But I don't know, I'm hoping for some energetic music and maybe some dynamic music changes. And, you know, additionally, I kind of mentioned this in the previous video I talked about with the Sonic Central analysis, which was earlier today or earlier yesterday at this point. But like the time of day changes, how's that going to go? Is that going to be dynamic or is it just with story progression? Because that's a little outdated and I feel like they could improve upon that, especially since they were trying to do it in Sonic 06, as we know from lost developer materials that were now found years later.
All of this is a very intentional choice. I asked Sonic Team head Takashi Iizuka to describe how the tone of Sonic Frontiers...
It's an intentional choice. All right. I mean, I'll bite. Go on.
Frontiers differs from previous Sonic games, and he said, past games in the Sonic series have taken different tones depending on their stories and themes. This time, these mysterious islands are the game's major setting. That's why our artists have worked hard to create a mysterious mood.
Okay. Past games in the Sonic series have taken different tones depending on their story and themes. I mean, okay, that makes sense. It's time the mysterious islands are these games' major setting. That's why artists work to create hard to create a mysterious mood. But that's the I'm telling you, I'm gonna put the link in the description. Go check out Sonic Guitars' video on the dynamic music changes, because you're meshing this open world thing with Sonic like running around and still, exploring familiar pieces of terrain and dash pads and fighting enemies. And like it shouldn't just be the cyberspace levels, and it shouldn't just be boss fights. Like the music should definitely change dynamically. I don't think they'd be creative enough to actually, do that, or they would think it would be too much work to implement that at this point. They have enough time to do that. That's like, completely revamping the physics system. We're probably not going to get it at this point since it's still set for a 2022 release, but dynamic music and, making sure that there's dynamic time of day changes and fixing the animations, those are all possible. And that brings me to my next point, which he's going to mention this was an earlier build of the game later on. I remember hearing that, but we'll get into that later. It's, so that makes us a bit more hopeful. But then why are you showing us this? We'll get into that in a second. But, he'll discuss that momentarily.
It's hard to create a mysterious mood. Of course, the big new change in Sonic Frontiers is
still needs the rock vibe, though. But a big new change in Sonic Frontiers is
the shift from purely linear levels to a huge open world where Sonic can freely run in any direction.
Again, false. You just say that because they've been doing linear levels for the past 10 years. It's like everyone on the official... this is why it enrages me sometimes with the people who are managing this franchise officially.
But Sonic Team...
because they're just... You literally had adventure, and you're not taking that influence. He's been able to run freely in any direction before, and you had a way to translate the classic physics, and you're re-releasing a classic collection, and it's like, how do you screw this up? That's like, it's the movement. That's what's like really bothering us, and that was, I think, my issue with, and a lot of other fans' issues, like on the first day. I was giving some positives, analyzing combat, but this still remains an issue, because if it's open world, it's not going to feel fun if you just hold down boost and you suddenly gain speed. It's like, let me roll. Let me have a feeling of momentum. And there's some stuff on that I have to discuss a bit later, but we'll get into that later. Let him continue with what he was saying.
Doesn't like to use the term open world to describe Sonic Frontiers' gameplay, instead referring to its style as being open zone.
Okay. So, open zone, meaning that, so the islands are like the big zones, and it's more of it's giant and explored. I guess that's what they're trying to imply with that. It still seems bad, because they were better off going with like the adventure field stuff, just having adventure fields and then, set action stages. That was a better formula, like from the Sonic Adventure series. And it's like they're missing that with this. And I know everyone's just going to say, "Oh, sit down, adventure fan." A lot will say, "Sit down, adventure fan. Just let them do what they're going to do. They're trying something new." But it's not entirely new. They have a template for this, and they're not using the good points that worked for it, at least in terms of their movement, which is troubling. But anyway, continue on. Also, I wonder if you can flip onto this rail, and that's why they slowed this down. But
open world
no,
games
never mind.
like Zelda or other AAA games fundamentally have RPG or adventure worlds. For Sonic,
open world games like Zelda or other AAA games. Yeah, we need Sonic to get back to AAA level, and in terms of the official releases, he hasn't done that yet. The fans have been carrying for the past 10 years. I just want to drive that point home. That's been what the issue is. I'm seeing some things that are positives here, but and again, it might be too early to judge. They might show off more during the month, which can tie it all together. We'll see. Fundamentally, have RPG or adventure worlds. And frankly, that would honestly be a good thing to anyone. I've said this before. To anyone who says, oh, Sonic's not allowed to have RPG, adventure worlds, serious stories. It's like, look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but those who just will absolutely say, oh, he's not allowed to have serious stories, I'm sorry, but shut up, you are wrong. Like, I'm sorry to drill that home, but that's where I draw the line. Like, opinions are opinions. You can have yours, but the idea that Sonic can't have serious stories is completely ludicrous when he's done it before and it has worked. There are times when it's worked in Adventure, Adventure 2. It's like Heroes wasn't as serious, but they still took it seriously enough to like give this air of like, oh, there's this looming presence. What's going on here? While still keeping it relatively positive. You know, the reason Shadow Story didn't work is not because it was serious. It was because he had branching pathways. '06 had some mixed elements, and people like have mixed opinions of that story, but it was serious. It knew what it wanted to do. Secret Rings, Unleashed, Black Knight, they all had serious stories, and frankly, the stories were some of the best parts of those games. Like they were all elements that worked and need to be brought back. But continue.
Worlds. For Sonic, the core here is a 3D action game.
Yeah, see, what that means, the translation of that is the core is 3D action, and what that means is just, oh, running around, gotta go fast, and I don't know, that's implying minimalistic focus on story, but you have Ian Flynn. Let's actually have some content and have the game sort of reflect that serious tone. Like, can we get off of the dashing like a maniac thing? And no, I'm not going to keep referencing that quote, but you know what I mean, because a lot of different fellow content creators and Sonic YouTubers here have referenced that same thing. We don't want to go back to that goofy action for the sake of action. We've got Flynn. Let him do his job with the story. All right.
Our basic idea was to have that take place in open space. What sets Sonic Frontiers apart is this different approach to an open
game world. You already had a different enough approach to an open game world that worked. And again, it was adventure, and we're still confused as to why it's not going in that direction. You know what? I should wait to talk about adventure stuff to the very end, but let's see what else they have to say.
Game world. Having played Sonic Frontiers for about 4 hours, it's easy to see what Izuka-san means. Sonic Frontiers' open zone design is very different from any other open world I've played. It's a giant playground. Every few feet, there's a bumper spring that bounces you like a pinball between 5 other bumpers.
A bumper spring. He called it a bumper spring, guys. I think that's even worse than bounce pad. Just call it a spring. Just call it a spring, all right? Nitpicking, but still.
It's a giant playground. Every few feet, there's a bumper spring that bounces you like a pinball between 5 other bumpers before putting you on one of the many grindable rail tracks.
So, automation. Yes, we know there's a lot of automation. That's not really. I mean, they're putting some control in the player's hand, but it's still just feels like automation. That's the main issue.
Speed ramp that sets you on a completely different path, leading to some other collectible or reward, or a line of rings that you can lightspeed dash into. Essentially, they've taken that core appeal of every Sonic level having multiple paths that eventually loop back around to the main one, and applied that to these giant non-linear open zones.
Non-linear is good. He's using the buzzwords there to get our attention and everything. But the thing is, like, I don't understand, why, I just, like, they're, go back to what they were saying before.
You on one of the many grindable rail tracks, or a speed ramp that sets you on a completely different path, leading to some other collectible or reward, or a line of rings that you can lightspeed dash into. Essentially, they've taken that core appeal of every Sonic level.
There's 2 problems I'm noticing here too. One, the collectibles are kind of boring. They're kind of boring, and they're not really addressing that. And it's like, oh, it sends you into some other kind of collectible. Okay, a bunch of collectibles, but there seems like a lot of them. They're in a lot of different places, and it's, I mean, we need to know, I guess, what they do first, but that it kind of seems like it could get grindy in that sense. He mentions the skill tree later in the video, so I'll let him get into that. That was some good
having
news.
Multiple paths that eventually loop back around to the main one, and applied that to these giant non-linear open zones.
Yeah, but see, the problem with applying it to just open zones, it's like, yeah, it's kind of cool with the adventure, but that gets old after a while, because we still want there to be some levels with a linear goal in mind. The idea of it being non-linear, of course you can do that in open zone, open world. That's easy. But all it is like branching pathways that lead back to a central point, so you can just re-navigate and explore something else. Like the appeal of adventure was like the branching pathways, like in Sonic, the classic Sonic games, you had top, middle, and bottom, and the top path was usually the fastest. But with adventure, there was a bunch of different branching pathways that could all lead to the goal. Here, they just sort of lead back to a central point, and I feel like that's what could be the downfall if that's the only appeal of the open world, but the actual levels that they have don't have that same design, because they need that sort of design in action stages, which is how it was in Sonic Adventure. So you can kind of see the main issue there, but continuing on.
One thing that has to be noted is that very few of these elements are built into the environmental design, meaning that rails, platforms, boost rings, and so on are just inexplicably floating in the air all around, which isn't totally unusual for a Sonic game, but it feels especially jarring in Frontiers in particular because of the frequent and sudden pop-in of these objects and the otherwise very naturalistic art style.
Yeah, okay, so he's saying he's noticed the pop-in, and he says it's jarring, but is it intentional then? If even an IGN official reviewer has talked about it, is it intentional? Like, and you saw right here, they're just kind of, they don't naturally mesh with the environment, he said. And that was like one of the main issues I talked about in the previous video. The rails are just floating. We don't question it with Rail Canyon because they feel like they mesh with the environment. As he mentioned, they don't feel like they mesh naturally with the environment here. And I feel like that's the main issue. That's why it seems so out of place. But he's almost talking about it as if it's intentional. So I'm very confused on that.
One thing that has to be noted is that very few of these elements are built into the environmental design, meaning that rails, platforms, boost rings...
so very few of these elements are built into the environmental design. And it's understandable that, like, I guess for some elements they can't exactly mesh perfectly, but they've done it before. They did it with Heroes, they did it with Unleashed. I don't know why it's so difficult here.
Rings and so on are just inexplicably floating in the air all around, which isn't totally unusual for a Sonic game.
And then right there, platform just pops in.
Isn't totally
turning radius is there, not there, and now it's there. Turning radius is better, by the way, but I mentioned that before. It just pops in right there, and it's just oops, sorry, hold on one second. Right, sorry about that. Now where was I? But yeah, like so he was saying the elements of the environment just don't really mesh well. They're I need to go back to what he said. What was the line again? Sorry, everyone.
Platforms, boost rings, and so on are just that rails, platform elements are built into the environmental design, meaning that
not many of them are built in.
Very few of these elements are built into the environmental design,
and that's why it's so
totally
jarring.
Unusual for a Sonic game, but...
and it just pops. He was talking about them popping in as if that was an intentional design, and I don't think that should be the case. Like I've mentioned it before. Like if for platforms you could easily put a propeller below there, or I guess you could say that this futuristic looking platform is kind of levitating. It still doesn't really explain the pop-in. Balloons, I guess I understand, but why not have enemies instead? Why are there just random homing points? It doesn't really... If there's an enemy here, I guess, I mean, some enemies can still be one-shot. Like, these could all be one-shot enemies to get across. I don't really understand that. But, it's like the rails, I feel like you could just either have propeller... like extra propeller appendages on them, or have... appendages isn't the right word, I'm sorry. Or have, like, iron beams extend down to the ground to make it look like they're just kind of there. Or, I don't know, maybe stone pillars. Like, they could be ancient architecture. Wouldn't that blend a little bit better? So, I don't know. if Sonic Team and Sega listen to feedback at all, that's something you can use. You have 6 months. You could probably put stuff like that in, give it collision. It likely wouldn't be too difficult. Anyway, I'll let them continue.
But it feels especially jarring in Frontiers in particular because of the frequent and sudden pop-in of these objects and the otherwise very naturalistic art style. Of course, it's worth emphasizing that this gameplay and the version that I played were from an early build.
There it is. There it is. Let's listen to him say it again.
Of these objects and the otherwise very naturalistic art style. Of course, it's worth emphasizing that this gameplay and the version that I played were from an early build. But this
gameplay and the version that he played are from an earlier build. He said it's worth emphasizing that. So if it's worth emphasizing that, he's implying that means that that Sonic Team is planning on changing things relatively drastically. Like he's implying that there's going to be a good bit more and a good bit more polish when the game comes out. I mean, we've been fooled before, am I right, guys? But that's somewhat promising to hear, but at the same time, it's suspicious. It's like, this is your big reveal. It's been 5 years since the last major 3D Sonic game, which was a flop, by the way, because Forces, the model of which they're reusing here and the physics of which they're reusing, which were reused from Lost World, and don't tell me otherwise, because I could go on to Sonic Forces right now and point out the fact that in the Infinite Battle, they have the orbital springs, they have the number panels from Lost World throughout many levels as collectibles. They're reusing stuff. Forces is glorified Lost World engine with boost, and I mean, obviously that didn't have drift, so they couldn't put that in. And boost and quickstep, pretty much. It's glorified Lost World engine with boost and quickstep. And here they're just adjusting it as well. Like, they're emphasizing combat, and they've taken away boost as a hitbox, which is good because that means you're not just blasting through enemies mindlessly. So that's definitely a plus. They've been listening to that. But it's frustrating that they think that's a good momentum choice because it's not. So the fact that he pointed out it's worth emphasizing, why would he say that? Well, I think there have been a couple of comments on Twitter. I don't know exactly the sources, but my friend Conic once again pointed out that the idea that this was an early build, it also implies that, he mentioned that there were some that were mentioning in later games, in later builds. I guess for those who have played it or for those who have seen it, that the momentum is more present. So does that mean we're going to get more speed downhill? Does that mean we're going to get rolling physics? I mean, it's like, it seems like it would make sense, and I'll get into that, to why with that towards the end of the video, because there's something I want to show off here. But it just seems strange. Why show an earlier build? It's to give us a general impression, but most people are thinking, myself included, that I think the combat's solid. It has a lot going for it. The soundtrack is okay. The movement is, it's not even passable. It's subpar. It should be better. We should expect better than this for the movement. And it's not because it's Sonic. Like, if it were a boost game, even if it were a boost game, it feels weird. They should have gone with adventure style. I know I'm using the word adventure too much, and I'm not just using it as a buzzword, but I will show you later on what I'm talking about. But the idea that they don't use that physics engine or something similar or akin to it in an open world feels like a missed opportunity. That's the main issue that I'm having with what I'm seeing so far. My opinion could change with what they show, but that's the main issue I'm seeing so far.
This is definitely an area that I would hope to see improvement in the final version.
Me too, buddy.
Beyond that, there are also a wide variety of puzzles.
Don't use the Sonic Boom puzzle. Everyone knew this was the Sonic Boom, but it's a wide variety of puzzles. Why use this? Dumb. Bad idea. No.
And challenges that are littered throughout the zone, and completing them is how you uncover sections of your map. Most of these are very simple, requiring you to orient the statue the correct way, quickly hop back and forth between colored tiles,
slightly new,
or use Sonic's new side loop ability to draw circles around certain...
Did he just call it a side loop ability? We all know it's called a spin cycle at this point from the leak. I guess they haven't actually confirmed it, but if it's called side loop instead of spin cycle, it's ribbon loop from Pac-Man World 3. If it's called side loop, that's a little too on the nose. So anyway, so there's this new quick step challenge.
Most of these are very simple, requiring you to orient.
Yeah, this is kind of dumb, bad animation.
Hop back and forth between colored tiles.
Simon says.
Sonic's new side loop ability to draw circles.
Side loop. I guess he was just using that as a placeholder name that he gave it, but maybe they told him not to use the actual name. Watch it come out and have it just be called Ribbon Loop. That would be hilarious. But I mean, yeah, it's Spin Cycle. We all know it's Spin Cycle.
Around certain objects in the environment to interact with them. The best ones, though, are the races against the clock where you have to get from point A to point B in a limited amount of time. The openness of Frontiers level design make...
What did he say? That was interesting. I missed that one before. The most interesting ones, the ones from point A to point B where you have to race against the clock.
Environment to interact with them. The best ones, though, are the races against the clock where you have to get from point A to point B in a limited amount of time.
Okay, if that's the cyberspace levels, that's somewhat interesting. But if there's also challenges where you have to like move fast, I hope the music picks up during those. But if there's challenges in the open world or open zone, if they insist on emphasizing that, challenges in the open world or the hub world that will challenge you to get from point A to point B in a limited amount of time, they sound like something from the Lego Dimensions Sonic pack where you had to like start at a certain gate, you would activate it, and then you have to get to point B to complete the challenge. And I'm honestly glad to have those back. That would be interesting. Would make more sense to have it with momentum-based gameplay, but we don't really have that. It's just there's idle speed, there's like tilting the analog stick to speed up until you get to your normal run speed, and then there's boost speed by holding down the button. And I just that doesn't really feel like it would be that great, but I mean, it might be all right, I guess. There's more that remains to be seen.
Openness of Frontiers level design makes straightforward races like these a ton of fun, because you have to
I
try
hope
to
so.
improvise a path to the end that might not be immediately obvious.